Hi, everyone. My name is Yogesh Shavda. I'm the founder of Y2S Consulting, and I'm also the Center Director for the Center for Marketing Solutions at the University of South Carolina. I'm absolutely delighted today to have Kushank Aggarwal here with us on the show. Uh, I've been following Kushank for quite some time on TikTok, and he has been such an inspiration to me in terms of everything related to new tools that he's sharing his wisdom on, from an AI perspective. And I finally said, you know what, enough. I have to reach out to him, and I have to kind of like have him come on this podcast. So, Kushank, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Akesh. Thanks for having me. I don't know you've been following for that very long, so that's good to hear.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So, the funny thing is that I'm finding so many people who are on TikTok who are sharing so much amazing and incredible knowledge. I hope TikTok stays around, and I don't want to get into the political side of it, but to me, it's been a really great resource for amazing content. So, before we get too far down the line, why don't we first start by introduction? So, tell us who you are. What are you doing? You have your podcast, your channels called the Digital Samaritans. So just give us a sense of your background first.
Sure. Well, my name is Kushank. I was born in India, but I moved to Canada when I was in my teens. I went to school for engineering. Like every brown kid, you kind of go with engineering, and then you figure out what you want to do next. So I kind of
Yeah.
wanted to work in between business and technology. So my program was like a bit more integrated engineering. So after graduating, I worked in consulting for a little bit, then in product management for a little bit. But I always wanted to build something. I like building things. I wanted to like build a company one day. Somehow TikTok sort of happened, to me. I don't think something I picked. It kind of chose me in a way. That's like
Hmm.
something I can talk about later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of how it all sort of started. And now, content is something that we do, but also, we are building a portfolio of micro-SaaS products. And then we have a separate company with a business partner, Megan, where we help businesses with AI automations and consulting to help them streamline processes.
Amazing, amazing. So tell us a little bit about your brand, if you believe that's the right terminology here. Digital Samaritan. That's such an amazing name that you chose. Give us a little bit of sense of what How did you come up with the brand name, and what's the concept behind it?
For sure. It all started in during COVID. So it's one of those, 2020 COVID stories. I was going through a phase where I was trying to get out of my comfort zone every month.
Hmm.
So like one of the months I was like, okay, I hate social media. Let me put myself out there. So I just started like talking about random things for 30 days or so with no
Hmm.
expectation whatsoever. And then a couple months, like it kind of became a habit creating those quick little TikToks. I didn't really tell anybody. And
Yeah.
then one of the videos sort of like blew up. There was a video about Microsoft Clarity. They just released Clarity, and being in product, I was aware of Hotjar. So I just talked about how some people, when you do visit a website, you can the the person behind the website, they can track where your mouse is moving, where you're clicking, and all that stuff. And the
Yeah.
tool is free to use for analytics. That video blew up. So that video got like 10K views in 2020, like in fall. And
Hmm.
then after that, I was like, cool, I was just chasing dopamine after. So I was obsessed with like just doing things faster and better, like being a generalist. So I was always like curious on what people are building through like Y Combinator Show, Product Hunt, Reddit communities, Twitter. So I
Hmm.
started sharing about all those things. I talked about Copy AI back in the day. So Chris, I spoke with him. I was trying to do a podcast too. So I was like, interviewed him about them building, using GPT-2 at the time to build Copy AI. So I
Yeah.
started talking about all those things, and I was like, like they call like, what am I doing here? Like, I should have a username.
Hmm.
And it's like, I guess I'm helping people. So like there's a word called Good Samaritan for somebody who's like helping without any expectation of return. I'm
Yeah.
kind of like doing that digitally because it wasn't something I wanted to like kind of like monetize or something. It was just kind of like a fun little hobby. So I was
Yeah.
like, I guess I'll just call myself Digital Samaritan. So that's how like kind of the whole thing happened.
Well, I think it's a brilliant name, because people are always looking for help and support, and I think that's one of the beauties of TikTok, where you get these really short, videos that says, "Hey, do this or do that," and your life will be slightly better. And I have to admit, there's some really amazing content like that. Like I said, I've been following your content, and I've found it to be incredibly useful from that perspective. So tell me, at some point, in your journey, you switched to talking about AI tools in particular. I'm guessing around the time when ChatGPT and the whole generative AI phenomenon started. Is that around that time, or was it sometime before that?
Like talking about AI tools, I think it
Yeah.
was back in 2020. So like
Okay.
I mentioned, I spoke with Chris, who's the founder of Copy AI.
Yeah.
Copysmith was a popular tool. Synthesia, the ones you use for AI video, that was one of my
Yeah.
first mega viral video with 500,000 views, again, in like
Oh,
2020. So I was
right.
talking about AI at the time as well, among like
Okay.
other tools as well, which were not AI.
Mhm.
But again, it didn't have that wow factor until it got some more mainstream adoption with the release of ChatGPT.
Got it. Got it. So tell me, as you're thinking about the content, and there's such a high volume of information coming towards us, you must have developed some sort of process for yourself to kind of like keep track of everything that's happening around you, right? Because it's overwhelming to a certain degree. So, could you speak a little bit about what's your process of trying to, you know, um, sift through all the information that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, my process hasn't really changed even before, like when I was creating content. It's just like going to the same sources I go to see what people are building, what they're building. And
Yeah.
then I just use things like in my own work or the things I do. And if I
Hmm.
find it useful, then I just feel like others might find it useful too. So that's sort of like the approach I take, and I just talk about it. If I just start chasing every sort of like, new feature release from all these big brands, it's like a super exhausting, never ending journey because
Yeah.
things are moving faster than we can imagine.
Yeah.
So like the process is like just kind of like scrolling Twitter, scrolling Y Combinator show, Product Hunt, Reddit communities, and just see like what people are talking about, what people are building, and
Hmm.
how can I use it to make my work better. The
Hmm.
other angle is like for example, the workflows. Like if I'm stuck with a problem, I want to do something because
Hmm.
I'm like aware of all the tools that are possibly out there.
Yeah.
So I just kind of like my brain kind of works as like a Lego, like kind of like a Lego maker. So I just know
Right.
like, okay, if I plug this with this, then this, I will be
Yeah.
able to solve this problem. So I kind of like approach it that way, like either just what people are building or like the problems I have that I need to solve for myself. And
Hmm.
if I have that problem, I'm sure other builders have the same problem.
Amazing. I love the Lego analogy. I grew up as a kid playing Lego, so I totally get what you're saying when you when you talk about that analogy. On the, I want to talk a little bit more about content and content creation. So you're scanning all these different sources. You're finding out what people are talking about. You're identifying some things that you've then experimented with yourself, and you're like, hey, I think this is something that other people would benefit from. I think that's what you're kind of like alluding to.
Yeah.
So. As you're then deciding, like, okay, within the tool there may be so many, like three or four different things to talk about. How are you deciding this is what I want to talk about?
Good question. I feel like, I mean, I've been creating content for over 4 years. I think I've like built this ability now to just identify what's just going to resonate the most with.
Hmm.
And also, like, the way I think about it is that if I'm talking about a workflow or a tool, is this bridging a skill gap or a time gap? That's how I think about it. For example, maybe there's a tool around designing. Like, I'm not a professional UX UI designer, but if it
Right.
can help me get from point A to point B,
Mhm.
with a minimal amount of effort or prior knowledge, that's something useful. So it's just about that. I mean, if you want to be more granular, I mean, I do keep track of all my data, like all the content for past 4 years. I look
Yeah.
at all the different hook types I've used. So like all the different user categories I've worked with. So again, I've built like a custom GPT or like trained like a model based on the data where I can plug in my idea and ask it to like give it a score on a scale of 10
Okay.
compared to like my other ideas. So you can sort of compare, what
Mm.
LLMs are recommending based on my previous data and engagement on those topics.
That's an amazing, actually, a use case for helping you determine content. I have not thought about that, so that's something I'll have to think about for my own stuff now. um,
Yeah, it's useful.
yeah, absolutely. See, you're being the digital Samaritan right there. So, give me a sense, of all the tools that you've been kind of like assessing and looking at, like, are there any like standouts in your mind as to, like, this is like really a big game changer like, all of them have their own utility value, we get that, right? But
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
some that really stand out. Are there like two or three in your mind that stand out right now?
I mean, I think just the big LLMs, like overall, I mean, if I want to put in the buckets, because there are a
Yeah.
bunch of different tools that do different functionalities, and I think it changes as well, like in terms of, from week to week where I'm spending my time within our organization.
Yeah.
It's hard to like pinpoint a few. I mean, of course, I'm gonna have a recency bias too, like whatever I used recently.
Hmm.
But I would say like Zapier is something I've used like quite often. That's something I spend a lot of time on because I think
Yeah.
with the capabilities of integrating the LLMs with already automations with all the API connections they have for multiple applications,
Hmm.
there's so much you can do with that. I mean, so Zapier is like something I've been using for many years. I think that one's pretty big, super impactful for us.
Yeah.
The other thing I use quite often, this is something I've actually noticed more consciously. For the past 3 months, I have barely used Google search.
Mm.
Like I'm just using Perplexity for like quick little fact checks or like any information I may need.
Yeah.
I'm finding myself using Perplexity a lot more often. I mean, basically all the time versus Google search. So I would say that's an interesting one as well. I would mention what else? I mean, there's a new tool I'm using right now for one of our SaaS for UGC content through AI, and that one's been performing really well too. So I'm
Hmm.
super stoked about that too. But I mean, the only reason is like there's also the downside for it that social is not social if like our content that's being used for marketing is actually not a real person.
Yeah.
There's sort of like that aspect to it.
Yeah.
So we use it right now as experiment and it's working for our marketing.
Yeah.
But I do feel a bit hesitant about like kind of using it for very long term.
I get that. I want to come back to Zapier for a second because admittedly, I'm not as savvy on using some of these workflow automation tools. Like I heard about Make.com. I heard about Zapier. I actually opened an account on Make, and I was literally just like poking around a couple of days ago on that site. Um, for somebody who's a novice like me, what would be your advice to us? Like how do you create the simplest workflow? Where should I start? And kind of like build my self confidence and learn my way through that kind of like workflow process
Hmm.
basically.
I would say like it starts with just kind of looking back into the work you're doing. Anything you think you're doing that's repetitive, that doesn't
Yeah.
require a lot more critical thinking or something that's a logic you can bake into LLM.
Yeah.
That's like a way you start. The other option is like, I mean, alongside that, you think about, the accuracy of the tasks, that, how accurate you want the tasks to be performed. If
Yeah.
it's like something super sensitive, for example, your tax stuff, you don't want to touch that stuff. If it's something as simple as like kind of creating a first draft from this podcast into a newsletter, maybe
Hmm.
that's something you can look into. Because a lot of the new tools that are coming out, we call them wrappers or like ChatGPT wrappers or like a bunch of different workflows. A lot of them could just be like replicated within tools like Zapier or Make or N8N, just
Hmm.
because there's just a bunch of workflows, bunch of APIs tied together with a user interface.
Right. Right. I get that. Okay.
I can
So
give you a couple examples as well, just to
yeah,
like, how do you think
please.
about that? One of
Yeah.
the simplest and most useful sort of workflow that we have is for customer support.
Okay.
We have B2C, SaaS, so we don't really have Zendesk or something installed at the moment. So we don't have that much volume that we need that as a essential for like in spending $50 a month on it.
Yeah.
So what we have is a workflow where when a user sends us a message, we have a workflow that first automatically sends them a reply back. Thanks for getting back, sharing your thoughts or your comments. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. Then we have a chat GPT step where in our like prompt, we have put together all our FAQs. So right away, like we have sort of prompt, looks at the question, goes through the FAQs, and drafts a response to the message.
Hmm.
So when the support team is going through the inbox, they already have a draft to all the questions that were coming in. So all they have to do now is like, just look at the question, look at the draft and see if it makes sense. If there's, if it's answered correctly, we just hit send. So that's a
Wow.
simple workflow that, helps our support team like close a lot of tickets faster.
Amazing. Amazing. And especially for a small organization like a small or medium sized company that can't afford to have an entire technology stack, this becomes something far more easily doable and manageable from a cost
Yeah,
perspective and as well as an impact perspective as well, I would imagine.
absolutely.
Amazing. And are you finding that companies are coming to you asking for these kinds of things, or you still have to go and like explain all these things to them and say, I can do this for you? Like where are you seeing the market right now on that spectrum?
I think, as you're watching the content, other business owners are also watching the content. So I think
Yeah.
the shift is happening already where businesses are being aware that they start
Yeah.
need to automating a lot of these processes, which
Hmm.
is going to save them a lot of overhead costs. The teams can be more productive and they can focus on tasks that are more impact, versus like all these nitty gritty, just computational like clerical work, so to speak.
Yeah.
So like I think just people have done like find me through content and they're reaching out to our company in terms of like, hey, let's have a conversation, what your team is like, what is possibilities here.
Hmm.
But half the time, like companies are already aware that they need these things and like what are the workflows they want to like sort of automate through either just simple automation or with AI workflows. And then
Hmm.
they're just coming to us for like someone who can actually execute.
Got it. Got it. So, in that context, I'm going to skip a little bit, and we might have jumped around a little bit on, this conversation a bit. But there's been so much um, conversation around agentic models recently, right? And I know you talk a lot about that right now as well. So, speak to us about that. And what are you seeing from these tools from an agentic model perspective? Maybe you may even have to explain a little bit about what agentic models are for our audience first before we get into the what you can do with it kind of thing, if you don't mind.
Of course. So I think the most simple way, I mean, I like to think about agents is just that there's AI automation workflow, as we talked about, with the customer support example.
Yeah.
An AI agent would just be like, would be more than an automation workflow. It's something that has a bit of a memory. So it is like making decisions to take kind of take the next steps. For
Mhm.
example, a simple example, if I want to add an agentic behavior to this is, for example, this is a workflow based on the request, it's going to determine, which person to sort of send that response to. Maybe we have like a multiple people on a support team with different sort of skills. In a way, I mean, I guess that's a very still a primitive example of an AI agent, but
Mhm.
any agent or any workflow that has a memory and then they can actually make a bit more decisions along the way in the steps based on the
Yeah.
feedback that's coming in. That's what I would call and sort of an agentic sort of behavior.
Mhm.
I, I mean, there's lots of possibilities where these things could go, but I think it does take a lot of time to like build one that's actually super useful because to kind of train that model, you need data, you need a lot of time, you need patience, you need development skills to be
Yeah.
able to kind of get to that perfection of execution.
Right. Yeah. No, I get that. Because I've been so one of the classes I teach at the University of South Carolina right now is AI in marketing, and it's the first time we're teaching the class. It's a 7-week class, pretty intense in terms of activities, and we were actually I asked my students to build an AI-driven chatbot last week, for example, and I only gave them 30 minutes, right? So they did a pretty decent job to have something, come up with an idea, build something, and obviously everybody chose something that was in the context of their areas of interest, so to speak,
Of
right?
course.
And one of the students actually asked me after the fact, like, hey, I hear about this agentic thing. How do I build that in? And I actually didn't know what to say to her because I haven't done one myself just yet. So
Yeah.
I've committed to them that I'll teach a class on that in the coming week or so. So that's why I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on that. Like, for someone who's starting up again, what would be your advice?
I think for simple agents, I mean, those are the primitive agents without the memory.
Mhm.
Zapier is the best way to do so. It's like just no code. You can connect your
Yeah.
apps that you want agent to interact with, and you can have a
Yeah.
prompt in terms of you tell what you want the agent to do. Then you have a chat interface where you can work with the agent. If you
Mhm.
want something, I mean, these are like more simpler agents. The other option is like N8N. I think they're doing a pretty good job. I think they're positioning themselves as like, the no code, low code agent builders.
Yeah.
That's the tool I would probably want to learn to start building those agents that are super
Amazing.
useful, especially in marketing.
Right. And do you see that this is, people keep on saying that like this is the hottest trend in 2025. Do you agree with that? Or do you see something else that's actually emerging as being even bigger than agentic models right now?
I think right now the hype is around agents. I mean, technology is
Yeah.
changing so fast. You have operators being released by OpenAI as well.
Yeah.
Once those have more public access, then you combine the technology with agents. I don't know
Mhm.
what you call those things.
Yeah.
So I think things are moving so fast. I mean, you do see like a lot of chatter about agents right now, but I
Yeah.
think those are the people who are far ahead in the adoption curve, like people who have already gone past the AI chatbots and AI workflows. For
Mhm.
the masses, like I had a workshop recently in a room of like 80 people, and none of them knew about deep research tool. That's a super powerful tool. Like now Perplexity has it, Gemini has it for months. ChatGPT, like OpenAI released it a few weeks ago. People
Yeah.
are not even familiar with that. So I think for a lot of the people, they should like kind of like not just kind of get caught up in what's just more popular. They got to start with the foundations and the basics. They need to understand how to start, using the most out of these LLM tools.
Hmm.
If the data security is a concern, like look into the privacy side of things, see
Yeah.
if their organization or their company is ready to sort of adopt it, the change management piece and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So they got to look into all those things before kind of getting caught in the hype cycle of these AI agents.
Right.
I think there's still like early stages for those. A lot of things, a lot of kinks to get figured out. So I think by the time they do get there, those things will be a lot more perfect for them to kind of get
Hmm.
into it.
Hmm.
So I guess my thing would just be like, instead of just trying to like do whatever's everybody's trying to chase, just see from organizational perspective, like what is something you need, and
Yeah.
then kind of like build the foundational blocks, get the team ready, and then move on there.
I totally understand that. And then, quite frankly, you're totally right. Because if you don't have a clear strategy for your business, right, you could just be doing stuff ad hoc, and that doesn't really give you the scale nor the impact that you're looking for. And you may just end up actually having a cost element that's not helpful to you. I'm with you on that 100%. So, do you, from your company's perspective, do you also offer that kind of like consultative, support to help the company figure out their strategy, and then you think about what's the tools and the processes that go along with that, or are you just focused on the tools side of it exclusively?
No, we do. I mean, for most of the clients that come into us, they already have a strategy. They know the need for it. But we
Yeah.
do we've had conversations with some companies as well. There was a call actually I had yesterday where they were like, okay, they know that these are some inefficiencies in their process, and they wanted
Mhm.
to work together to sort of build out the roadmap and the strategy of how we go about solving those challenges
Right.
in months' times.
And are these typically like marketing oriented problems that you're solving for, or are they across the board like supply chain or finance, or what's your remit?
I think most of the companies we have talked with so far are like not like the physical businesses per se, like mostly on the services or digital or like tech side of things.
Yeah.
So the problems we have been helping them solve are either marketing or operations. So I think
Okay.
those would be like the two big buckets, I would say.
Got it. Got it. So, as you're thinking about this, and as you're building your practice out, um, are you seeing that the business model is also changing, especially with things like agentic AI is becoming models becoming a bigger deal, or are you just seeing this as tools as being part of an existing process and workflow, and it's an enabler? Where are you seeing the market right now?
I've not noticed any changes in business models per se. I think people are sort of operating the same business models. They're leveraging the tools to like lower their cost of operations so
Mhm.
they can increase their margins. What impact that's going to have on the pricing model, I think that's still yet to come. Because if everybody's kind of doing that stuff, everybody's operational costs are coming down. Does that
Yeah,
mean the pricing is going to change as well? We haven't seen that yet, but yeah, it will be interesting to see where it heads.
got it, got it. So for people who are, trying to build their own AI driven, toolkits, and they want to offer that as a service to other companies. You've kind of like done that in your own way, it seems like right now already. So, are there any initial learnings that you've had that that you think others should be aware of in terms of what to do and what not to do as you're building an AI driven business, so to speak?
Like which business are we talking? So that we have like the SaaS side of the business where we're building a portfolio of micro SaaS products, or the consulting side.
I'm talking about the consulting side in particular right now.
Okay, okay. For consulting side, I mean, I guess can you repeat the question again? I lost
Yeah,
it.
are there any learnings that you've had that for people who are starting off a consulting business like the one you have? Uh, any tips or advice you'd give people on what to do or what not to do as you're trying to build your business?
I think one thing would just be to not overpromise the customer. We get carried away with lots of ideas and what's possible,
Yeah.
and also the setting expectations. Like when you build an AI agent, you build an AI workflow, you still need human intervention. If you just expect it to like work, perfectly by itself without human intervention, I think those are like the bad expectations to set.
Mhm.
So I think those were like the couple of things that I would mention are like super critical to keep in mind.
Right. And are you also like advising and consulting on how to actually build the product, the AI tools out, or is it a case of that you already have pre-built tools that you're just kind of like offering it as a service to your clients?
We're not offering anything pre-built. It's all like bespoke. So based on like every business has different requirements in terms of what they need and how they operate. So
Yeah.
it's a matter of like consulting, see, how what they do, where they are at, where they want to be, and then how
Mhm.
the team can come in and then like help them get there. So
Right.
it's like a matter of like first mapping out the whole process, finding out where the opportunities are, and then
Mhm.
the team to come in and execute, and then make that happen.
Got it. Got it. So, shifting a little bit, my question here, um, do you do you use like AI, generative AI tools to be the equivalent of your co-founder, or as a partner in your own thinking process as to what you want to do next, basically?
Co-founder, I would say no. I mean, I think even for co-founder, I guess you have to sort of define the roles and responsibilities. I
Yeah.
mean, on the tech side, the tech side of the business, which is a SaaS, my brother is my co-founder, so he leads all the technical side of things.
Yeah.
And on the consulting side, I have another business partner, Megan, and she does all the operations and everything else. So I don't
Yeah.
think those things are where we are like finding the value. But
Mhm.
personally, for all the work I do, I definitely use LLMs as consultants. For example, we launched a new SaaS product recently, and then the positioning we launched at wasn't resonating as well as we wanted. So then
Mhm.
I was like working with the LLMs, identifying, okay, here's just our landing page. What do you think this is trying to do? Who do you think the customer is? So like using it as a sounding board, and then for ideation after, okay, so if we change positioning to this from this, what do you think is going to happen? Or how big is going to be the market size? What sort of market share could we capture in this scenario and stuff like that? So I use it as a sounding board quite a lot, in terms of like helping me through like strategy work for the business.
So I love what you just said, because I had not thought that you could use it as a way to, calculate market size and market share. That's something I've somewhat shied away from. And maybe the reason I was shying away from it is because I thought it was a large language model, so it's more text oriented. But it sounds like you're actually using it to give you calculations and numbers as well. So I'm curious as to how accurate do you think those numbers are when you get that?
So I'm not sure about the accuracy of the numbers, but I think from the ballpark perspective, I mean, I look at these numbers from relative scale perspective.
Okay.
If I'm like looking at scenario one versus scenario two, like how do they
Mhm.
compare? And
Yeah.
then since like I'm leveraging tools with more search capabilities, for example, research tool by Perplexity or Gemini, I
Mm.
mean, it is basically going through the stuff I would go through myself, through all those links and data points that I'm going to go through myself with the
Yeah.
information available on the internet.
Got it.
So I think it's probably just doing a really good guessing game, which I would do myself, but I'm just saving a lot more time this way.
Understand. So, because now you brought up deep research again. So, when you brought it up the first time, I was actually thinking about your question as well, or your comment as well, because you're right. It's been around for a while with some of the other platforms. OpenAI just recently released it. I think it's on the Pro version, if I'm not mistaken. It
Yeah.
hasn't made its way down to the other versions just yet. Um, how good is that? Are those tools at the end of the day? Because that's the question that I keep on getting asked by people. What has your experience been on that? What are you seeing as its trends? Are there any limitations that people should be aware of? I'm just curious.
So I've not used the Pro version yet. But I've used it on Perplexity and I've used it on Gemini. So I've
Hmm.
used it on Gemini quite intensively in the past. Like, Perplexity just released like last week. So I haven't spent as much time on Perplexity's deep research as I have on Gemini.
Hmm.
To me, like the different ways I've approached this is to, like look at some market trends. I looked at some trends in the influencer marketing industry, and
Yeah.
everything it sort of talked about was pretty spot on because I could relate because it was speaking from a perspective of a creator, and
Hmm.
the points it listed out was pretty well thought through.
Hmm.
The product that we launched, we did a lot of deep research in terms of competitor analysis, in terms of the market landscape. Again, all the information that was brought up in the report was
Hmm.
pretty decent. Because I mean, it is as good as the information that's already available on the internet. So if you
Yeah.
can trust information that's on the internet, these tools are super powerful because all they're doing is like saving you the time of going through hundreds of websites yourself and then sort of like aggregating all that data. So it's a really good aggregation tool that can take bunch of different sources of knowledge and information and put it all together to answer the question that you were researching about.
Right.
In terms of limitations, I mean, you can't really sort of control. Maybe you haven't tried it yet. Like in terms of the types of sources you want to go after,
Hmm.
maybe you want to like maybe kind of like look at maybe I just want resources from domain ranking above like I don't know 50 or something. So like those sort of like fine tuning of just how you want it to do the research.
Hmm.
It's not something I have tried, or I don't think it's possible.
Yeah,
Maybe I just haven't tried hard enough yet. I think those could be like interesting like sort of things, but I guess that's the limitation because it's like doing its own research on all the articles that may have that knowledge we're seeking.
I understand. Do you feel that the degree of specificity in these analytical tools are pretty good, or do they still tend to be somewhat high level when you first run your prompts on those kinds of platforms?
I think for deep research specifically, I'd say it's pretty specific. And of course, it does point and tag all the sources where the data is coming from. So if you just want to dig deeper, you can just reference to the source and then,
Mhm.
just search over there. I mean,
Yeah.
even for that, you have those Chrome extensions that can like, you can chat with every web page. So again, if you just want to be really AI focused here, you get your report, you click on the source and you just chat to identify exactly what you want instead
Mhm.
of trying to read the whole article.
I understand. But you know that the interesting thing in what you just said about the whole deep research and the landscape assessment that it can do for you, you know, one of our undergraduate classes that I also teach at the program, we spend a third of the semester learning about, how do you do a landscape assessment? What are the components of it? And I asked the students to go do research for a particular product or a company that they're working on for the semester. The fact that you can now do it through Perplexity or Gemini or Claude or even now ChatGPT, it's going to impact us in terms of how do you educate and build people's skill sets around this, that
Yeah.
we've done it quote unquote the traditional way, right? Rolling up your sleeves and actually going and doing the research.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now it's being done for you. So how do you even assess then that what you're getting back is really good or not?
Yeah, no,
You
I
know?
agree. It's a big challenge. It's like the same as like, if you want to leverage those agents or workflows, you need to
Yeah.
do things first. You need to know how they're done and then use it to scale things up. Like that's
Hmm.
how I sort of think about it. Even
Hmm.
for all the marketing work, like if you don't know what's working for you and you just start throwing like a bunch of AI tools and workflows to like maybe get lots of articles written, SEO, content, you're not gonna
Hmm.
get anywhere. It's unlikely. You're just gonna be doing a lot of things
Yeah.
without getting the results. I think it's like the same approach, I would say, like, for academia as well, for people who are learning. They need to still build the skills first so they know what they're looking for, how to do something. They can critically think about the results they're getting and
Mhm.
then leverage the tools to like, kind of scale things up or do things faster after.
Right. Yeah, and that's exactly it, right? Because if the application isn't working the way you want it to work, then then the tool is not working for you. So you have to then think
Yeah.
about how do you fine tune the tool, or is it even the right tool if it comes to that particular point, basically, right? I totally get that. I've found in my experience, like at least with ChatGPT, um, the I deliberately go through like two or three iterations just to make sure that I've got the degree of specificity that I want. Otherwise I just feel like I'm getting something. I just don't take everything at face value. I'm kind of like applying that what if mindset, if you want to call it that, to just make sure that it gets me to the degree of granularity that I think would be relevant for
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
consulting clients at the end of the day. So
Yeah, the way I see it, it's like everybody's kind of moving from, let's say we're all a publishing company, like everybody used to be a writer, now everybody's an editor. The
yeah.
writing task is that like with the AI, like we just use it to get the information. Then it's our job to do the critical thinking and like actually think about the results we're getting to see if it makes sense. Is it accurate? Like how does it sort of relate and be that critical thinker?
I really like that analogy of being an editor versus a writer because I talk about it in a similar vein. Like we need to elevate our level of critical thinking, but I think you've just contextualized it in a much more simpler way that I think everybody can understand. Like, okay, you are now an editor, not just a writer anymore. So that's really smart. In fact, now that I think about it, one thing that I do for my conference presentations, just if this helps anyone, is that once I build my presentation out, I actually upload it into ChatGPT and I tell it to critique my own presentation.
Hmm.
Where am I strong? Where am I weak? Are there gaps in my logic flow in my presentation? And are there things that I'm missing or whatever? It does an incredible job of giving you, let's say, unfiltered feedback,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean, right? And it's actually helped me improve the quality of my presentations as a consequence. So
Very nice. I mean, if you want to take a step further, you can, use the voice feature and be like, hey, I'm going to present the whole thing. Give me feedback, ask me questions.
oh my gosh, I never thought about that. But now that you mentioned this, I am going to practice that now because I have a presentation coming up in about a month's time right now. So I will do that. Great idea. Thank you for the tip.
Of course.
So I wanted to just spend a few minutes talking about scaling businesses, right? Because that's the other part that you talk a lot about as well on your platforms. So how do you think about scaling from where you are, especially if you're early on in your business? What are the steps are you thinking about, and how do you think we should be leveraging AI tools and automation tools to help you with the scaling process?
So the way we're thinking about it is like we want to do experiments first. So for example, like I mentioned earlier, we're experimenting with AI generated UGC content for our short
Mhm.
form channel.
Yeah.
We have seen some good results with that, recently. So now we know that sort of like marketing channel is working. We're looking at comparing the data, like okay, so we're getting the views, we're getting the top of the funnel, but is
Mhm.
that converting? So
Mhm.
like we're doing, like how they say in terms of like startups, like do things that don't scale. That's like the same mindset or approach. That's something we want to take for scaling as well, where we start these little experiments. The next one I'm working on right now is like looking at building a whole newsletter and like kind of content marketing side for one of the SaaS. Then the next experiment lined up is from on the SEO side of it.
Yeah.
So the way we want to approach is like see all the experiments we want to do, leverage the tools wherever we need operational efficiency to do those. But
Mhm.
once we have those experiments proven, now we train the models, the agents, or the workflows to be able to do those things at scale. So
Okay.
that's how we approach it. Like we want to test things first, we know what's working, and then we leverage AI to like just do things faster after.
Right. Right. And you find that by going through those little experiments initially, people might think you're going slow, but actually you're not going slow at all. You're actually kind of like learning a lot and failing cheaply, and then you're able to say, okay, this is what's
Exactly.
going to work, and then that's why you're able to then scale much faster as a consequence,
Exactly.
like you mentioned, right? Yeah, exactly. No, that's what I thought you were. I can completely see where you're going with that. Um, have you found challenges in scaling at times, even after going through the experimentation process?
Of course. I mean, I think we're a bootstrap business, so biggest challenge for us is always the resources and the team because
Yeah,
um, I mean, we have four people total, including myself and my business partner,
yeah.
working on everything, and then we have a few contractors, and right now we're working through some federal programs for interns. So I
Mhm.
think one of the challenges we see is like kind of like getting people up to speed and like just kind of like the similar organization challenges everybody kind of goes through at early stages. But beside that, I think like once, like I was saying, in terms of like kind of like scaling up the processes with AI, it's just like it takes time to build out something that's good
Mhm.
enough to be to be deployed. Most people sort of like give up early on. Okay, like you try a couple of prompts, you try a couple of workflows, it didn't work,
Mhm.
and you're like, okay, it just doesn't work. But they forget like you just need to like spend a lot more time to iterate with those models, iterate with those tools to be able to get to the result that you seek.
Right. Do, and in that process, like as you're going through it, I've always wondered, like do you get concerned, or do you have a limit in terms of how many tools you're trying to connect in your workflow? Because you're moving information from one to the other. There's always that risk of something falling apart in the process, right?
Of
So
course.
do you have any rules of thumb? I guess is the question, in terms of, like
Yeah.
don't go more than 5 tools, or 10 tools, whatever it is. How do you think about that?
I think the minimal, the fewer the better, of course, less
Yeah,
breakpoints. But I mean, we use Zapier for pretty much connecting a lot of our workflows. So, I mean, unless something is custom coded,
yeah.
yeah, we don't really have like a rule of thumb in terms of number of steps or tools you may want to have. But I
Mhm.
would say for the most part, if you're using like multiple different applications, we're not doing more than 3 to 4 applications per se in our most of the
Okay.
workflows that we have right now.
I understand. And what I asked you in terms of, like, is that even a real concern, or is it just something that I'm kind of like, thinking about too conceptually?
I think conceptually it does make sense because like just the more areas of breakpoints, for
Yeah.
example, you're using a tool, they change your API settings or something, or
Mhm.
they deprecate their older version, and now you have something that's breaking.
Yeah.
But I think just having like someone to sort of look after those things, is like just basically simple monitoring is what you need.
Yeah.
And the other thing would be to look at how critical the task is. So if
Mm.
the task is like not business critical, let's say it's not like it's going to impact your customers.
Yeah.
If it's going to impact your customers, that's going to have more consequences. I would be very careful of how I implement that and like have alerts like for basically like microseconds. If something breaks, I want to be like on it as soon as possible. But for
Got
our
it.
stuff, we don't really do anything like that. Everything we're doing is internal, so our impact is like minimal. So I think
Right.
it's like just balancing the impact and the risk that that workflow or that whatever you're trying to build is going to have.
And again, not knowing Zapier well enough, is it easy to troubleshoot when something is not working?
Yes. I mean, depends on who's the one building it or how good the documentation is. For example, if it's a complex workflow and then you work with someone external building it, it might not be as easy for you to kind of come in and figure it out. But,
Mm.
for example, if you have good documentation or, maybe whoever developed it, they recorded everything they did and you turn that into a chat LLM they can chat with to help you troubleshoot, that's one
Mm.
thing. Of course, most of the tools like Make or Zapier, they have their internal troubleshooting sort of assistance as well. That's going to help you figure out where the issue is.
Right. Right. Yeah, because I think you're right. Like, especially when you're having others build it for you, you got to know how to troubleshoot it. Otherwise, you're constantly having to go back to them to help you do that.
Yeah. Even if
Totally.
it's like, you're building fully coded agentic workflow, it's the same as like building a software that you have third party building versus internal building.
Yeah.
Things may break, you have bugs, and it's
Mhm.
just going to be dealt the same way. It's just software development, just done in a different way now.
I understand. I have to tell you the story. This is like from like the 1990s, way before the world of AI and everything. But I was working for P&G at the time, and we were just one of our vendors was just introducing the software that would take all our um, trade data. So the data that would capture sales from all our retailers and would basically aggregate it and tell you your market share, like you were talking about earlier, right? So this company launched their tool, but it was so like like in our world today would be like version 1.0. Something went wrong and we couldn't make the tool work correctly, and I didn't know how to solve for it. My IT guy in the company couldn't solve for it, so we eventually had to call them and says, can you got to help us figure this out. They flew a guy from Cyprus all the way to Saudi Arabia, which is where I was working at the
Wow.
time, to help us figure it out. Do you know how long it took him to fix the problem? Literally
30
30
seconds.
seconds. 3 weeks and a business trip later, we solved it within 30 seconds. And I was sitting there thinking, like, why didn't we figure this out ourselves? And that incident stuck with me all these years. you know. So hopefully it's not as bad as that situation that I faced back then with these tools.
Hopefully not. I mean, now we can just have them document everything and then just have a chat interface. But like, okay, so basically, like, kind of clone them in terms of how they build it.
Exactly. So look, I don't want to like take up too much of your time. So I have just one or maybe two more questions left. Um,
Absolutely.
as you're thinking about people who are, a lot of people who watch, this podcast, a lot of them are independents, and a number of them are just starting to get into the whole AI space. It's taken, a year for them to feel comfortable enough to say, okay, I get it now. It's here to stay. I've got a little bit of experience using it on, in my business or whatever. um, if you were to advise them and say, hey, these are the top 3 or 4 tools that you should be thinking about from an AI perspective for your, you know, independent solopreneur business, what would you suggest would be in that toolkit for you?
I would stick with the basics. I would be like going for Perplexity for just quick research side of things. I would look into Claude for writing tasks and brainstorming work.
Mhm.
Chat GPT to build GPTs. Like even before you get into agentic or even AI workflows,
Mhm.
just like start leveraging those custom GPTs as a really really good start to start
Yeah.
seeing the value of these tools. So I will just stick with the basics.
Stick with the basics. Okay, got it.
Like kind of
And
master the basics and like advance from there. Like with Claude, start building using those artifacts. Start building those reports and stuff. So you can do a lot with those tools if you start using the right prompts and you start
Mhm.
leveraging the prompts the right way, and then understanding how the LLMs work.
And in these LLMs, do you feel that there's a way to build out dashboards that are effective as well, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, depending on your use case, I mean, if you're presenting it to like, let's say stakeholders, maybe
Mhm.
those dashboards wouldn't be as useful. But for like a lot of the personal stuff, a lot of the stuff within the small teams, those dashboards could be quite powerful. Let's say you have data you throw in your Excel and you turn that into some, like Julius AI is a tool for like quick data analysis. Of course, if you're okay with, trusting the tool to share your data, if it's proprietary and stuff, you can do a lot more analysis without hiring a data analysis guy, because you just ask it
Yeah,
questions in plain English, like, hey, there's my data. What do you think is a sales forecasting trend in like 3 months' time?
right.
Again, you can do that with ChatGPT as well. So those are the ways you can like start uploading your documents. You can build little assistants there to like help you do these like sort of tasks which are a bit specialized.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so last question, my friend. What's your biggest piece of advice for content creators?
Just start posting. Don't worry about the quality. Don't worry about the results. You just start posting, start sharing whatever you want to share, and you will learn and things will happen.
Great advice, because I have to take your advice, because I started posting on LinkedIn. That's been my go-to platform. I do a newsletter every Monday, and then I do this podcast every second week, basically. So that's been my startup journey. It's not that old, like this is my third season, granted, but of doing the podcast. But I'm still learning my way through the process. I totally agree with you on that point. Um, I don't have the confidence yet to do what you're doing on TikTok, and doing the short form videos. That for me is still a bit of a new thing. So I
You
have
just
to
gotta
build
do
up.
it. Dive in the deep end. Maybe don't show your face. Just like talk behind the camera.
Yeah, I guess you could do all those things. I need to be clear on my content strategy for that. Let's put it that way. And I'm not clear about that just yet. So I need to have that level of confidence before I can actually start doing it. Is what I'm guessing on TikTok. But
Hmm.
um, any last words before we end the show on your end?
No, I mean, thanks for having me. It was a great talking to you about all these topics. It's always super fun.
Awesome. Well, Kushank, I can't thank you enough for coming onto the show. What I will say to the audience is that you need to follow him. Digital Samaritan. That's his handle on TikTok. It's on YouTube. It's also on, I think, X as well, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm assuming you have no issue if people follow you here also on LinkedIn.
No.
Um, and you definitely want to watch his TikTok videos, because he gives such great advice on different tools, and you never know when it comes back to you in terms of wanting to use something. So initially I was saving all the his TikToks. I was like, wait a minute, let me just follow the guy. And I'm so glad I do both now, because I've got a whole library of things that I know that would be relevant for me at some point in the future. So Kushank, thank you so much for everything you're doing for everybody as a community at the end of the day. So really
Of
appreciate
course.
that.
Thanks,
All
Akesh.
right, guys. Yeah, all right. Well, thank you so much again. And our next show is going to be on, I think, March 7th, with Paige Lord. She is an expert on responsible AI. She's a product manager at GitHub right now. She actually just talked to my class this week, and it was a phenomenal conversation that she had with my students. I would highly, highly recommend you join and watch that episode next in 2 weeks. And if you haven't had the chance to watch this entire episode, please make sure you do, because Kushank's got some great, great advice for you as you're thinking about your business and AI in particular. Thanks, everyone, and see you next time.